Welcome back everyone to another exciting edition of H1Z1 base, and this is revision 3. Looking at revision 2 right now just to kind of review my last theoretical build. A couple things bothered me about this build. The main stash area felt a little bit too open, being able to more easily see into it before even attacking the base. There's a lot of wasted space on this end, and here near the front door you got a big wide open gap, which is kind of useless. So everything in here is kind of compacted, really tight space, so I wanted to see if there's a way I could open that up. The garage area is pretty limited to the front of the base here. Really exposes vehicles to getting destroyed through walls. So I wanted to see if there was a way I could change that, make vehicles a little bit more secure, a little more difficult to destroy from the outside of the base. So now we'll look at revision 3. So here's revision 3. We got, so there's some things I found out here. The rear stash area, I went ahead and closed it off. And throughout the base, what I did is I made these little exit doors. They're exit only. So there's one on this side near the main stash, one on this side, and one on this side. So that allows you to exit the base pretty easily from any direction. And these doors are pretty easy to close as you're dropping down to the ground. So they don't stay open and allow people to easily access the base from a different angle. The other thing I realized is these little barrels right here, I could place these and it would allow me to access the roof area, but only when the gates are open. So this gate here on build 2 was open, but in this build it's actually normally left closed. So when it's open, you can jump up on the barrel, jump up on the gate, and get an access to the roof. And it's the same thing over here. This gate has to be opened in order to use the barrel to access the roof. And both of these gates can be closed once you're up on the roof from the roof area. The places where vehicles can go has also been expanded. You may notice the stairway has been moved over out of the way. And the good thing about that is that means that this gate has to be blown through to even access this stairwell, this whole stair area. So you can still store vehicles here in this front area, but that's probably going to be more like a last resort. Preferable would be to store the vehicles internal to the base so they couldn't be destroyed just by shooting the outside of the base with explosive arrows. So I think 4 vehicles can probably be stored relatively safely in the space. 2 here, 1 underneath this little garage, covered garage area, and then 1 here in front of the gate. Anything that's going to be closer to the outside of the base, such as here or in the one of these 3 spots, is going to be more exposed to be shot from the outside with explosive arrows. So I think that's pretty decent to be able to store 4 vehicles plus an additional potentially like 1, 2, 3, 4, 8 vehicles in one base. I don't know if it'll ever come to that, but there's a lot of room for vehicles here and relative safety. So I also removed the tower because I felt like the tower was just something I continually had to work around in order to keep it from granting too much access to the roof. And so I just decided to just go to remove it because the only access I want to be able to get on roofs are these 2 barrels here. So if you're just making a loot run, you can easily come into the base, access this gate, jump up on the roof, access the primary stash. So it's not like you have to run through the whole entire base to get to the stash, you just got to access this barrel. And if you happen to be over at the primary stash, you can exit from the exit door here, but if for some reason you do need to get to some other part of the base, including the roof, you can just open the gate, jump up on the barrel, and have access to that. So if you're being sieged from outside for some reason, you can get out of the primary stash without having to go outside the base. or exposing yourself too much. I mean, the roof is a definite exposure area, but at least you're not having to like jump across from roof to roof or exit the base completely to access the um, to get to enemies outside the base. I mean, you could jump up on a roof, you can shoot them from the top of the roof or whatnot. So if someone was to destroy the first gate here, they'd have to destroy the second gate. And this is talking to you like if they have to get to the primary stash or they're trying to get to the primary stash. I added a gate over here just for a little extra protection, a little extra insurance in case they try to blow straight through. In terms of like blowing through the first gate, blowing through the second gate, blowing through the third gate, getting up on these stairs, destroying this structure. If that happens, then they still have to blow through this gate to even access the primary stash area. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 barriers that they'd have to get through just to get to the primary stash. Anything else is just decoy doors. And again, this base is designed to be easily repairable for the most part. So the only other thing is you'll notice if you look at the fortress area to me is really pretty much unnecessary. I think in most cases it may not even be built just because it requires so many resources for so little benefits. So the only reason to build it would be if you just had so much resources that you didn't know what to do with it. But I think the primary base is going to take enough resources as it is, and it's going to require a lot of repair over time. So it'd be really painful to have to repair 2 bases, especially if it's just a single person. But I did add this roof area over here in case this structure did get built, and I put this barrel in place to be able to jump onto the barrel and into the base, and again, you'd be able to easily get back into the other base without crossing over the old gate bridges that were kind of they're little bridges. You can easily fall off of them and end up outside the base, and then you might be screwed depending on who's outside. So it's to the benefit to be able to access each base. And the biggest strength of this base is really just these barrels right here are huge, because without these barrels there's no way to get on the roof area, and that means there's no way to access the secret stash, which is the most important part of this base design. So I did do a few building phases based on this design. So kind of like the first thing you're going for, the second thing you're going for. So I'll go over those real quick here. I'll hit phase 1 first. So here's phase 1. You're building the foundation, 3 foundation expansions, and then your goal is to put up a gate here just so that people can't drive up a vehicle on here, at least initially. And then you got 3 large structures here. And the goal is to get the primary stash up, that way you start building stuff and storing stuff in there, and then in the future you're just building around it and making it more secure. So this is just the bare bones getting the base up and running. So now we'll move to phase 2. So phase 2 we have the whole point of phase 2 is to secure the stash from anyone being able to just walk up to it. In this case, someone would have to blow off this gate and drive a vehicle up here to be able to access the primary stash. I mean, other than that, they would have to blow off, like this gate. Well, not really necessarily this gate because they could get up here, but they'd have to blow off this gate to get to the primary stash. But at least this gives it a basic level of security. So at this point, someone would have to bring in a little bit more explosives, or possibly a vehicle if they didn't have enough explosives to access the second level. So phase 3. Oh, and again, I mentioned I put a barrel in here right away and a gate here, so that way by phase 2 you'll be able to access the secret stash area. So phase 3. So phase 3 is just really preventing people from driving up a vehicle and getting into the base that way. So I've walled off here, here, and here. This gate actually will open to wall off this area. I just left it closed in this figure because that's where it would be placed. And then there's another large structure placed here. So at phase 3, you're going to have to blow off this gate to access the base in any way. Optionally, you could also, instead of placing these two wall sections and this wall section, you could place two gates here, like this one. So it would still wall off the area. The downside really though is they could always drive up a vehicle, jump on the vehicle, and then access the stash from this way, unless you put up a couple wall sections here to block that off. But I think it's just better to kind of build it like this to kind of completely prevent any ability to just drive up a vehicle and jump on the platform. So we're on phase 4. So phase 4 is kind of putting up a second line of defense here. Before you just had to blow off one door to drive into the base. Now you have to blow off at least 2 doors to drive into the base. So you've kind of put up a second line of defense. Anybody who wants to siege the base has to take off 2 gates versus just 1 gate just to get into this internal area. So with phase 5, now with phase 5, started to secure the primary stash more, added a couple more structures here. So this way, if anybody is able to get a vehicle into the base, they're going to have to blow through at least 3 doors to access the primary stash. And then we have phase 6, which I think this is the final phase I've configured. Everything after this is kind of just icing on the cake. So here I placed some structures to prevent a vehicle from even being able to access this area over here. So at this point, you're going to have to blow through some buildings to access the primary stash. There's no driving a vehicle in, there's no cutting corners. So there you have it. From here on, you're just kind of adding whatever you want to in whatever order to complete the final phase of the build. But I'm even more happy with this phase, or this revision 3, than I am with the revision 2 that I did here pretty recently. But it's one of those things that's going to take a lot of resources. One thing I did want to mention is before I had managed to create the entire base out of large structures. To complete this build, I mean, I tried really hard not to use any small structures, but I did have to put one here just to make this build as perfect as it could be, because there wasn't any way I was going to be able to fit a large structure here without compromising any kind of like usability or vehicle storage space. So there you have it. We'll give it a try when we ever eventually get a wipe here. I've kind of been waiting patiently, but kind of anxious to give this build a try in game and just make sure that everything actually is able to be placed. I'm pretty confident it'll be placed. I don't really have any doubts that anything can't be placed, but you never know what will happen in game and how things will change as more patches get released.